So tonight's talk, Flo's a friend I've known for about 20 years. She was at Explore Adventure Travel when I joined as a rookie tour leader, say about 20 years ago. Uh, Flo's a legend in travel and in certainly Explore terms. So she'll do our presentation. Just say about quick thing about questions. If you'd like to mute yourselves anyway now, but if you do have a question, Flo's quite happy to answer it on the fly, if you like, when you think of a question. If not, that we can do it at the end. And also there's the chat box as well, which we'll monitor. So if you've got a question, you can type it in there. That's probably the least disruptive method of doing it. But if something comes up that you really want to make a point, then just dive in. But other than that, if we can mute ourselves. So let me hand over to tonight's talk, an interesting talk by Flo McEwan. Thank you, Flo.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm just going to attempt to share my screen and hope I don't blow up Russia in the process. Right, share. Tell me you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Thumbs up all round. Wonderful. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's really nice to do these talks. I do love talking about my travels and my adventures, I must admit. This is a funny presentation I put together. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of a few of the different things that I do. Let me just talk through what we're going to do tonight then. So first off, we're going to have a little bit of a session on taphophilia, which isn't as rude as it sounds. And I'm going to talk specifically about my favorite graveyard, which is just divine. Then I'm going to talk about a bit of an obsession of mine, which are these huge, rusty, old Second World War gun towers out in the Thames estuary. They are fascinating in themselves. The story, from a visual, they are so imposing, so brilliant to photograph. And then we'll segue into a little bit at the end about Spitfires, another of my passions, and I'll talk a little bit about how I got into them and my adventures doing air-to-air photography, which has been a real challenge, I have to say, but immense fun at the same time. So a little bit about me. So I'm going to confess straight away, I'm not a technical photographer. I don't understand f-stops. I don't know about exposures. Everything's on auto. So just to sort of set the scene for what you've got coming at you this evening, I have a very modest setup. I've got a Nikon P1000 bridge camera and a Sony RX10 bridge. And I use my iPhone as well occasionally. So everything you're going to see tonight is being shot on one of those three cameras. As I said, I've got no competence at all when it comes to photography. So I like to talk to give people inspiration because I'm told I've got a really good eye. And I think some people sometimes get quite hung up on having the right kit and spending lots of money on expensive lenses and this, that, and the other, that sometimes they lose their way a little bit and forget this is about producing a piece of work that, number one, you enjoy doing, and secondly, hopefully, somebody's going to enjoy looking at. And I want people to feel inspired that you don't have to have really expensive cameras, you don't have to be technically brilliant, but you can still come up with some pleasing photography at the end of it. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think it's been really good for some photographers coming in and starting out and thinking, oh my God, this is all very overwhelming. To show them the kind of things they can do. I have the spray and pray approach where I will just take lots and lots of photos and hope something is going to be good at the end of it. And I do an awful lot of research as well into finding interesting places to visit. And I have particular interests in Second World War, old relics, abandoned buildings, brutalist architecture, all the really, I think, visually interesting and quirky places that you can visit. So, yeah, so it's going to be an interesting evening, I think. I feel sometimes a little bit overwhelmed speaking to people that I know have got a lot of experience, they've done a lot of travel, and they've also got a lot of very good camera equipment. But it's interesting when I go out with my photographic friends, and by the time they've set up and got everything going, I've probably taken about a dozen shots. And have they actually looked properly at what they're shooting and trying to get that composition and having the eye, I think is something that isn't, I don't think you can really learn it. I think it's something, it's a bit like music. If you can read music, then great, you can play some beautiful tunes. But if you can do it by ear, I think it's coming from the soul. And I think photography can be a bit like that as well. So, despite my lack of expertise, I've managed to get my work into some quite great places, and I'm super proud over the years of some of the publications that have actually featured my work. So, I actually, when I was putting this together, I was thinking, blimey, that's quite a list, and I'm super proud of that, considering I have imposter syndrome. I'll be the very first to admit it, and so I struggle. If somebody says my photography is good, I kind of wince a little bit. And then I've also been able to do some other work as well. I've had a few album covers. Somebody on Instagram liked, in fact, ironically, one of my Chernobyl photographs, liked my photo and said, I'd like you to do some pictures for me. I'm doing an album and I need some artwork for it. And would you come and do some shoots for me? And it turned out to be the Ministry of Sound. And so I couldn't believe it when suddenly I was doing an album cover and also a 16-page in a booklet providing the images for that as well, which is quite something. Because of my love of history, I've done quite a lot of television work as well, particularly with the sea forts. I'm a bit evangelical about talking to them, so I've spent quite a bit of time on some television programs talking about them, which has been brilliant to raise awareness of them. Because I'm very passionate that we don't teach enough about our history, our recent history in our schools. So I like to have the opportunity to talk if I can. And then I was shortlisted as Historic Photographer of the Year, only because somebody put a gun to my head and said, you must enter some of your pictures. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dreamt of doing it because I just didn't think I was good enough. So super proud of that. So my interest in photography, and particularly in abandoned buildings, Gothic graveyards, concrete, that kind of stuff, really stemmed from this place. This is up in London, Crystal Palace subway, an old Victorian subway. And I'd somebody showed me a photograph of it many years ago, 16, 17 years ago now. And I just fell in love with it. I couldn't believe that this amazing structure was existed. It was just so beautiful, I thought, in its decay. But also the fact that it was in London as well. I thought, wow, this just it looks so Moorish, and just not the kind of place you'd find near Norwood. So that was it. I started to get really interested in abandoned buildings and started to try to track them down and see if I could find any. And it was actually, it took me 15 years to actually get into the subway itself. And it really didn't disappoint. But I love the idea of rust and decay and the textures you get with it. And so that led me to start looking further afield. And I read about this amazing place in Chiatura in Georgia, Stalin's rusting cable cars. So this is it's a place called Chiatura, which is a manganese oxide mining town, and these old rusting cable cars go up and down the mountain with the miners, taking them to work and back every day. And they've been there for many, many years, and there are hardly any of them at this point in time. They were starting to decay and collapse. And there were three of these cable cars left in existence, and that was it. I didn't know where they were at this point, but I knew I had to go and track them down. And I found them by chance. The guy that wrote the reportage that I read had actually just started up providing tours out here. He runs a company called Brutal Tours, and they are brutal, I have to say. And yeah, so I ended up going out here and just they were just amazing to look at. And I rode up and down across the river in this creaking old car, which and the miners there were they couldn't believe this weird blonde woman had come all this way just to see their cable cars. But I was snorting manganese oxides, soot from my nostrils for days afterwards. It's a filthy place. But I find the textures beautiful, but also a little bit frightening as well to look at. And I think that both compels and repels me. Um, there's definitely more of a passing resemblance to my old rusty sea forts in the Thames estuary that we're going to have a look at in a moment. But I just find them fascinating. I could look at them for hours. And I love Georgia. I just adored the place. The people were wonderful. The scenery is beautiful. The wine is amazing. And so I really wanted to go back. And I was reading about a breakaway state under Russian control called Abkhazia, which is at the other side of Soviet Georgia, that suffered a brutal civil war. And after that, basically, a lot of the buildings were abandoned and were decaying. And it was quite a difficult place to get to. The Georgians don't like you go in there. The Russians are sort of wondering why you're there. So it was a bit of a rigmarole to get there, and it involved a lot of permits and just a challenge to get there. But it was just amazing. I could talk for hours about this place. This is the Parliament building, which has been absolutely blown to pieces during the Civil War. And it's the kind of place you if you're into abandonment, it's perfect because everywhere you turn, there is something interesting to look at. I actually got arrested out here for trespassing in an old railway station, and that was, I mean, as I said, I could talk for hours about this place. The people out there are fascinating as well. Walking down the promenade, and I noticed this guy sitting on a bench, and he had his pet with him, which I thought was a dog. And as we got closer, it was actually a lion. And I think it's so surreal. What an extraordinary place. And I got paralytically drunk at 8 o'clock in the morning with this old lady in a market who was selling her moonshine. I'll never forget that place. It was just so extraordinary to visit. I would love to go back again, but I don't think in the current climate it's going to be something I'll be able to do anytime soon. This is the decaying railway station. So much nicer than London Waterloo, isn't it? It's just beautiful. And anyone that loves abandonment is going to have Chernobyl on their wish list of places to go. And I was out there, I think it was 2017 with David. And I had the most incredible time. I absolutely loved it. I was planning to go back as I was chatting earlier, and unfortunately we had COVID, which got in the way first, and then obviously war broke out just as I was about to go, literally. So I've not been back. And I one day hopefully will have peace, and it's a place that will be available to travel again because it is truly, truly unique. I think David's done a talk on it already, so you'll know the story of how it came to be. And, you know, it's been uninhabited for 40 years now. Places are as they were the day that everybody was evacuated in April 1986, slowly being reclaimed by nature. Just an extraordinary place. And I never forget when we were there, the soundtrack. I always try to remember smells and I try to remember sounds of wherever I travel. And my soundtrack to Chernobyl was the sound of crunching broken glass underfoot, but also really strangely, the sound of cuckoos in the air as well. It was a really weird juxtaposition. But what an amazing place. I just loved it. And back home, I started to try to find other interesting places to visit. I love, as you've now worked out, I love decay. I love this sort of gothic creepiness that you get with these places. And I started researching the Magnificent Seven London cemeteries, and these were exploded in popularity in the 19th century. In 1800, London had about a million as a population, but by 1850, it started to double. And then by 1900, it had grown to 6 million. And you've got huge overcrowded population. And when you're starting to get this level of death, as you would naturally have, they were struggling to find places to bury all of these people. So the government was encouraging private enterprise to step in and solve the problem by buying land and creating these garden cemeteries. And there's seven of them in London. If you've never been to them, I would thoroughly recommend them. They're very unique. Each one has its own style and history, but for photography, they are absolutely beautiful. And this is the stunning gates to the Egyptian Avenue in Highgate Cemetery, very famous cemetery. Lots of famous people are buried there. This is leading up to the catacombs, past all the vaults of the Victorian gentry. And they share their resting place with a colony of very rare cave spiders. And some of these old cemeteries have catacombs and vaults as well. Some of them are closed for various reasons. Norwood has the most extraordinary catacombs, but unfortunately, they've had a lot of leaking roofs over the years, and it's not safe to go in them anymore, unfortunately. So they're closed to the public. But this is one that you can get into. It's in Brompton Cemetery. And they sometimes have open days, or I've been in deeper into the catacombs with a group called Subterranea Britannica, who do a lot of sort of underground exploration. And these are just beautiful. I think they're beautiful, the way that they are decaying silently and crumbling with age, so you can see the lead-lined coffins. In the 1800s, the Victorian mourners, they'd go to the catacombs and pay their respects to their dead relatives. And it was quite common, in fact, for them to go in on a Sunday afternoon, all dressed up in their, their finery, their mourning dress, and sit by candlelight next to the head of the coffin. And they would read to the dead from a much-loved book, and talking to them as if they were still alive. And I love the Victorian way. I just think they are interesting in how their attitudes towards life and death. And I think, I just, the rich history you get from these places when you can read the plaques and learn about the people, or you see their graves. And if they had a very posh address, they would actually have their address on their headstone. So everybody knew that they were, wealthy and well-to-do, even though they'd died. But it's not always morbid, though. I love cemeteries. Sometimes they are just brilliant for nature and wildlife as well. Brompton particularly has a family of really lively, very, very tame, friendly squirrels. And I'll quite often nip into Tesco's across the road, get a bag of monkey nuts. And they are so happy to come up and have their photo taken, which I just absolutely adore. Really cute little things. And many a happy hour I've spent in the cemetery with them. I'm sure they pose for the camera. They're just beautiful. And sometimes I'm really, really lucky, and I have a close encounter with one of the urban foxes that lives in the cemetery. Again, this is Brompton. And I just love the contrast of his fur, this beautiful, rusty, amber coat against the grey of the headstones. He was just beautiful. Sometimes they'll run away, but just occasionally you'll get that magic day when they're happy to be with you. And I spent hours with this little fellow. He followed me around for ages, a good couple of hours. And I didn't really have much in my handbag at that point. I had a biscuit or something, so he had that from me. But now whenever I go up there, I always carry a couple of sachets of dog meat with me. They must think I'm mad. So if I do come across him, then I can give him something to eat. And then the last time I was up there, one of the local cats was in the graveyard as well. And again, his markings, I think he must be Bengal, but his markings are just beautiful. And again, he was happy to pose. I think he could smell the dog meat on me, probably. Bless him. So that the London graveyards then, the inner city churchyards, they were absolutely full to the gunnels by about the mid 1840s. There was cholera outbreaks as well. And that was only exacerbating the problem of where are they going to bury all of these people. And so they established Brookwood Cemetery in Surrey, which was around about 1852, I think, if I remember correctly. And this was formed by the London Necropolis Company to address this overcrowding that they were experiencing in London. So they purchased 2,000 acres of common ground and set it up as what was then the largest cemetery in the world. And so that was great. The problem was solved. They had plenty of room for burials. But then the next problem was how are you going to get the dead from central London down into Surrey for the burials and funerals to take place? So they actually set up a specific railway line called the London Necropolis Railway, and that ran from Waterloo to Brookwood. And here we have it. To this day, you can walk along Westminster Bridge Road and still see the original building. It's still there to this day. I think it's just been sold, and I have a feeling it's probably going to be turned into flats because everything else does, doesn't it? And this is where the terminus would start and where the mourners would congregate, and where the dead would begin their final journey. So the station had a couple of waiting rooms for mourners, the hydraulic lift to take the coffins up and down to the platform. They stored the bodies there, which the local residents weren't too happy about, as you can imagine. And in true Victorian style, they had first and second or third class funerals. So you could choose, depending on how much money you did or didn't have, how your funeral was conducted. And the second class allowed some control over your burial location. And the third class meant that you would be literally buried in a pauper's section of the cemetery. And they had first, second, and third class coffin carriages as well on the train. And this is it. This is the London Necropolis train on its way down to the cemetery. It would go at about 11 o'clock in the morning. It would leave the smog of the metropolis and steam through the countryside and arrive at Necropolis Junction. And it was felt that because the scenery was so beautiful coming out of London and going through Surrey, that it would be very soothing to the Victorian mourners to have this lovely view as they accompanied their loved ones down to the final destination. And it was busy. At its height, the railway was transporting about 2,000 bodies a year. And it's about 200,000 bodies in total over the whole 87 years that it was in operation. But during the war, the demand dropped anyway for the railway due to a number of factors. There was an awful lot more municipal cemeteries opening up, and people were starting to consider cremation as an option. So there wasn't that need to be carting bodies down south, if you like. So it really got to the stage where it was not as popular. And then in 1941, there was the Blitz, and a lot of the infrastructure was destroyed by the bombs, and they decided not to reopen the railway after that point in time. And this is down in the cemetery. This is one of the stations within the cemetery itself. And if you look, you can see down the bottom, there's a little mausoleum. I'll show you that. It's still there to this day. Beautiful little mausoleum, one of my favorite ones in the cemetery. And in fact, this is that very same building, but taken from the other side. And there is that mausoleum sitting there. Beautiful. So this is the route of the railway, coming from the station at the top and making its way right through the centre of the cemetery, right down to where the chapels were and where the burials would take place. And you can see to this day, there's still remnants of the actual railway track and the platform. And it is just a beautiful cemetery. I know some of you have been there perhaps, but if you haven't, I would thoroughly recommend it as somewhere to go because it is just divine. It's the most beautiful place. It's huge. You'll need such a long time to have a look round, but it's such a photogenic place. I mean, I go there literally every week. I find it a very relaxing, balancing place to go. I don't like crowds and I don't like busyness. So for me, it's perfect because it's just a very calming place to be. And I tried to go all year round, and it's a different cemetery at different times of the year. Spring, I'll take you through the seasons. The spring is a lovely, fresh, the light is beautiful at that time of year. Um, you've got a more civilized sunrise at that time of year as well. The cemetery opens at about 7:30, 8 in the morning. So I try to get there for opening. And you can see again, that's that same chapel that we just saw in the old Victorian photograph. And you've got these beautiful lights sweeping down. It's just it's such a photogenic place. I just adore it. And quite a lot of bird life down there. I've lost count. I should really make a list of the different bird life I've seen, but it's a very nature seems to love it. It's one of those places, I think, probably because it's not so populated with people. You get the odd person you'll see there, but very, very few, which means it's a nicer, calmer place for the wildlife, I think. And the trees are wonderful. This is just amazing. As you can see, I've positioned myself so those trees are framing this beautiful little mausoleum. And a lot of people don't even realize that. They sort of walk past and don't notice it. And then you turn back and you go, gosh, look at that. How well they've actually framed that. It's beautiful. And then you have these absolutely enormous redwoods and giant sequoias as well. They are absolutely massive. I mean, this isn't the tallest one. Some of them are like two, three times the size. It's extraordinary to see. And lovely listed monuments as well. Just beautiful. Summer is a riot of colour. Summer is such a lovely time again to be there. In the north side of the cemetery, there's lots of flower beds and it's very, very vivid and it smells beautiful at that time of year as well. And you get really sharp shadows, which I think lend themselves to nice close-ups of some of the angels in the cemetery too. But you've got this riot of bees. They are all out there. It's a real hive, literally a hive of activity when the flowers come to life. Beautiful, beautiful place. And then autumn is just stunning. They've really planned the cemetery for autumn, I think. Particularly the northern part is where the military graves are. And there's a huge Canadian military cemetery area there. And they've got the Canadian maples, which you can imagine the colour at that time of year. It's very, very special. And then you've got all this lovely glowing, the ferns are coming to life, almost like they're on fire. Beautiful. And again, this is one of it's all little gold mosaic on the monument there, all grade two listed. And I love this one. This it reminds me of the Taj Mahal. It's just this really quirky little grave that somebody's decided they wanted something extremely different. Um, and it just looks lovely again with the background of the golden trees bursting into life. And if you love your fungi, again, perfect place for it. The soil can get quite wet, and I think that again lends itself to good fungi in the autumn. So you'll get pretty much every kind of mushroom or toadstool that you can imagine will be there. And then this is the Canadian area I was talking about. Those trees are gorgeous, but they don't last long. You've got to really time it. You know, you'll go one beginning of the week and, they're not quite out, and you can go maybe the next week and they're pretty much done. So you've got to be spot on just to make sure that you get that right timing to get the optimum color. And this is the American Military Cemetery. I took this, it's about 7 o'clock in the morning on Remembrance Sunday. They'd put all the flags out. And later on the day, there would be crowds of people here. They have ceremonies all day long, guns going off. It's quite a spectacle to see, but I love to be there before the craziness and when it's just really, really peaceful. And again, the light just coming down in the morning was absolutely gorgeous. And the shadows are lovely as well. Again, this is the same part of the cemetery, and can't quite see it in this image, but the shadows of the crosses look like servicemen standing to attention. It's very, very sweet to see, very sort of poignant. And this in the window, you can see they've hung up one of the military uniforms, and it's almost like one of the servicemen standing to attention, guarding the graves. And winter again, lovely for getting there for the sunrises because again, sunrise is that a little bit more civilized. In the summer, it's no good. You'd never be able to get there um, sort of 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And I love it at this time of year. And this is one of the pictures I took quite recently. In fact, again, the light was just streaming through. The frost on the grass was lovely as well. And this again, the American cemetery with all the crosses. You might recognize this cemetery. It's quite famous as well, this particular area. A 1973 film, The Omen, with Gregory Peck. This was the final scene in the movie where Damien, the Antichrist, turns round. He's standing in amongst the graves, the crosses, and he turns with his evil little face to look at the camera, and that's the final shot in the movie. So, yeah, a bit creepy, but fascinating. And then, of course, the birds again. And I just love this little plump robin just sitting quietly on the tree. And then I went there. I was looking at the weather forecast one Sunday morning a few years ago, and they were forecasting blizzards. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to see what it's like there, in a completely different scenario when the weather's very, very different? Because we don't get a huge amount of snow around here. So to be able to go somewhere and take some pictures in the snow, I thought would be quite special. And I just loved it. It was the most amazing morning. Treacherous drive to get there, all the windy roads or the forest roads, skidding around in my little car. But I got there as the snow was starting to settle. And again, this is the mausoleum that we looked at the very beginning, the little one. And I love the fact that the snow has, it's almost cancelled out the noise that you get in, with grass and twigs and stuff in photos. The white of this crisp, untrodden snow just allows the mausoleum to pop. Just lovely. I love that little mausoleum. I've always said to myself, one day I'd like to be buried in Brookwood Cemetery. It would be perfect resting place, I think. And again, I thought about doing a series of Christmas cards with some of these images because they're just, it's so rare to get proper nice snow in this country. It doesn't last very long. And I just loved the fact that I was the only person there as well. Nobody was silly enough to go all the way out there on such a treacherous day. But you can see the snow creeping up the tree trunk as well. Lovely. Beautiful. So many of these mausoleums scattered all over this. I mean, as I said, it's acres and acres. It would take you such a long time to walk round all of the cemetery. You'd need a good day if you were going to do it justice, but it's well worth it. And they do guided tours of the cemetery as well if you wanted to actually go and learn about it. But what they've got on the notable graves is they have a little signpost with a QR code. So if you wanted to do it yourself and just scan the code, you could learn about the notable graves as you're going around. And I love this beautiful one. Again, she looks really white and pristine, but the snow has made her look a little bit dirty. And she's over in the north side of the cemetery, and not far from where she's buried is the rumored to be the final resting place of Freddie Mercury, because his family grave, the Balsara grave, is in that cemetery, and rumor has it that his ashes were actually interred with his grandmother. So just literally in front of that grave is supposedly Freddie Mercury. And again, look at the snow. It's totally changed how that cemetery looks, and the what were bright white crosses have now become quite dull in comparison to the crisp white snow. And my favorite part of the cemetery are the deer. I never used to see deer here at all, and then one day I saw one, and I see them all the time now, and it's just so lovely. Again, I love this idea of life after death and creatures thriving in people's final resting places. And these deer are so lovely. They can be a little bit skittish sometimes, but if you are very calm with them and keep your distance, so it's a good zoom is a great help, then you can follow them round and they're quite calm with you. I've never seen a fox here, funnily enough, never seen a fox at all. A few squirrels, but they tend to run away. They're not like the Brompton squirrels at all. They're not friendly, and they won't come up to you. They'll run a mile if they see you. But the deer are just gorgeous. And I put together just a few photographs of my few visits when I've seen them. I love this particular day. This one seemed to like to stop in front of the mausoleums to pose, which I thought was very good of him. And again, just popping up from behind the ferns. And then one day we were in the Canadian cemetery, and this little fellow popped round the corner, which I've never seen them over that side before, but they obviously travel all around the cemetery. They're not afraid to wander and picking some of the flowers, unfortunately. And then this little fellow, he was so sweet, and again, not bothered by me whatsoever. If I wear my red coat, they'll run a mile, but if I'm just in muted colours, they seem more than happy just to hang around and let me follow them around. Bless him, little fuzzy bum. Again, all of these are shot on mostly my Nikon for these ones, and some of them are on the Sony, the bridge camera, all shot on auto. I love again that contrast between the colour of the fur and the greyness of the headstones. And this was a lovely early morning, get a little bit of backlight. You can just about see his breath as well in the frosty morning air. And again, it's almost like they were posing for me. Just got it right. A couple of ornaments on the mantelpiece. And then to my delight, at the end of last summer, the next generation were born. And again, just to see these cute little things, it was so lovely to see them. And I was down there day before yesterday, and there's now six of these deer wandering around, which is great to see. So they're back, and they're going to be around for quite some time, I would imagine, which is just great. So if you can, I would thoroughly recommend a visit. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place, and the history there is amazing. And if you like just peace and quiet, then you'll never beat it. It's gorgeous. And now for something completely different. So we know I'm obsessed with rust and we know I like history. So it was inevitable that I'd find out about these incredible gun towers, the Monsell forts. In the photograph you see there is their creator, Guy Monsell, a military engineer. And again, somebody showed me a photograph of the forts, and that was it. My jaw hit the ground. I was like, "Oh my God, they're amazing! I have to go and see them." And that was the beginning of a real love affair with this incredible set of some of our military history that not that many people actually know about. And I'm, as I've said earlier, quite evangelical about them and the difference they made during the war. Everyone's heard of Spitfires and all the heroes of the aviators and everything, but there was guys out there doing a remarkable job during the war, and I like to think that I can do my bit to remind people of the service that they gave us and the lives that they saved during the war as well. So this is going back then to the war, just to set the scene of how they came to be. Um, London was under attack. We had the Blitz. There were 18,000 tons of high explosives landing on the city. 30,000 Londoners were killed, 50,000 injured, tens of thousands of buildings were destroyed, thousands of people were homeless. It was a real terrible time for Britain, and something needed to be done about it. The problem we have here is that there was the blackout. So obviously at night, everybody had their curtains shut, the street lamps were off. So pretty much London was in darkness. So the enemy aircraft weren't able to see where the city was. And so, it was making it difficult for them to get into the city and drop their bombs. The problem was nobody told the River Thames. And under moonlight, the river is twinkling. And that was actually used as the enemy aircraft were flying over the channel, and they came into the estuary, and they were using this twinkling River Thames at night as a navigational aid to guide them into the centre of London to drop their bombs. So the Admiralty and the government needed to find something, some way of solving this problem that London was facing. And so they went to some engineers and asked them to find a solution, to come up with some ideas that might actually solve the problem that we were facing at that time. And this gentleman here, my hero, Guy Monsell, was the gentleman that came up with this incredible idea of these gun towers that were going to be strategically positioned out in the estuary, at sea, to shoot down the enemy aircraft as they approached Britain. And here they are. This is them being built on land, an incredible feat of engineering, built under a veil of secrecy over at Gravesend in Kent, and towed out to sea by steam tug, which in itself is just remarkable. And they were sunk onto the seabed, where they sat waiting for the enemy aircraft. So the top two photos you see there are the naval forts. So they are 110 foot high, hollow legs. And the ones below, the more sort of Star Warsy like looking things, are the army forts. And again, they were all built on land and towed out to sea. And this is where they were positioned. So right around the coast of Britain, on this east side. So up on the Essex side and down as far as Whitstable. There were also a set that were put up in Liverpool, but they were considered a danger to shipping, so they were pretty much taken down as soon as they were put up. So, but to this day, there are still some of these sets obviously in existence. And here we have them. This is Red Sand Fort as it stands today. And you can see why I love it, can't you? It's just rust and it's imposing and it's just otherworldly to look at. And as you approach them by boat, they're 78 foot high. So can you just imagine? And on the boat, when we go out, we get up really close to them. So they are towering over you. They're quite something to look at. And there's only four sets of forts left to this day. And this particular set were after the war. They put them on a care and maintenance program in case they needed to bring them back into service again. But by the mid 50s, they realized that they were past their use. And so when I say they, I mean the Ministry of Defence abandoned them. They technically probably should have dismantled them, and that would have been that. But I think at the time they had other things to do, so they just left them. And there they sat, not owned by anybody, sitting on Crown Estate seabeds. So they were a bit of a sort of an anomaly as to what would happen to them next. And along came the 1960s with the pirate radio stations starting to look for interesting and helpful places to broadcast. And they started to set up residence in some of these abandoned sea forts. And this particular set of towers, Red Sand Fort, was used for Radio 390, which broadcast in the mid 60s. And then after that, the British government didn't like what was going on, so they introduced the Broadcasting Act, which shut down all of the pirate radio stations. And so the pirates left, and the forts were abandoned yet again. And then along came this late 60s and the 1970s, and they started to become an interest to the media and to film companies. And this particular set of forts was used by Danger Man. They filmed a story of a Danger Man out here with Patrick McGowan. And they also did a story for Doctor Who based out on the towers as well. And they've been used in numerous pop videos as well. The Prodigy are filmed out here. And Artemis Fowl, the Disney film, used the towers as well as one of their locations in their movie. But they're just gorgeous. And, on a calm day, this is my favorite type of day is when it's absolutely mirror flat calm. You've got reflections. There's a buoy there, there's a little bell in there, and you can just about hear it ringing. That's all you can hear out there. It's quite tranquil again. Just very, very stunning. This particular image I shot again on one of those perfect days when it was just so, so calm. It was amazing. And this is the image that my friend made me enter into the Historic Photographer of the Year competition, which you're probably familiar with it. It's a global competition. You've got thousands of entries from all over the world. Some supremely talented photographers are entering some eye-wateringly stunning photos. And I nearly had a heart attack when I got the notification that I'd been shortlisted. And I was in the final three, and I literally could not believe it. I was shocked beyond shock. For somebody that has imposter syndrome, as I've said before, to be singled out, I was so proud and humbled at the experience. And the interesting thing was, this is quite a sort of renowned photography competition. It's always featured in the national press when the finalists are revealed and the winners are announced. And when they did announce them, the image that was the hero shot in all of the national press wasn't the winner, which was a photograph of the Mulberry Harbours, I think, if I remember correctly, but it was this shot. So this particular image was double page spread in the Sun, not page three. And in all of the broadsheets, it was put in Country Life magazine as well as the only photograph that they featured from the competition. And I think it's because it's such an interestingly different place. And I think a lot of the images that were shortlisted are stunningly beautiful, as I said. But I think a lot of people have seen the Mulberry Harbours, a lot of people have seen the Taj Mahal. These are familiar sights to people, but this isn't. And I think that gives me the advantage because I'm showing them something they probably haven't ever seen before. And that in itself draws the eye in because you think, flip, what is it? Where is it? That looks really weird. And so that made it particularly interesting, I think. And also, there's a lot of space around this image, and that lent itself to the magazines that used it. And this was also the cover of Johnny Rotten Public Image Limited album cover as well. Again, because they could frame the fort with their font and the wording that they wanted to use as well. So yeah, I'm immensely proud, and it's just still to this day I can't believe that I would have been shortlisted for something like that. But there we go. But I got very involved in the towers back then. There was a restoration project that were looking to try to bring one of the towers back to life and restore it. So I got very much involved from a legalities point of view of looking into ownership. Because that's the big challenge, isn't it? If you can't own it, how are you going to encourage investment? And as I've said before, they're not owned by anybody because the Ministry of Defence decommissioned them and sort of walked away from them. And Crown Estate, although they sit on the seabed, Crown Estate don't own the chattels, the structures that sit on the seabed, and they had no interest in owning them. Historic England weren't interested. They didn't want to have them listed in any way. They didn't think it was feasible. And so having worked through all of that, I came to the conclusion that it was going to be an absolute challenge to get anybody to invest. And we're talking about a multi-million pound project here. Um, Nobody would invest that kind of money unless they could be certain of ownership and also certain of a return on investment. And given they're sort of 6 to 8 miles out at sea, and as you can see how I'm trying to board it there, it's not an easy get in. And so it's the kind of thing that I recognized was not really going to come off. So I spent about 2 years on that project looking to see what we could do. And in the end, the conclusion was probably not going to do anything at all, which is a great shame, but it did give me access to them. And I had some amazing times up there, I have to say. You can see the extent of the decay walking around the side of this particular gun tower. It's, you've got to be so careful where you put your feet. Absolutely treacherous, it really is. But the view from the tower top is absolutely remarkable. I've inset there a photo from the war, so you can literally see a then and now image. That's where they kept the shells in the cupboard cage thing there. And I spent, as I said, when I was out there, I did a lot of film shoots out here, and I'd bring people out, and they'd climb up the stairs and get onto the roof, and they'd catch their breath because it was just the most remarkable sight to be there and to look around and see all these decaying towers around you. It's quite something. And, it's so interesting just to take really different photographs from there. This is reinforced walls to withstand blasts. They never needed to have that though, because they never came under attack themselves, although they did shoot down 22 enemy aircraft. And so the servicemen that were out here, how miserable must their service have been so far out at sea, in all weathers, and I've been out there at all different times of year, and I'll tell you, it can be pretty damn grim out there. So those poor guys who had to serve on the fort, um, I do a whole talk all about this, but they had suffered from fort madness, from just being so solitary in such a hostile environment. It must have been horrendous for them. But what an interesting place. You look at the foliage, you'll take a lawnmower out with you. It's extraordinary how the bird poop has brought all of these seeds and things out with them. And there's a hive of wildlife out here as well. I've seen butterflies out here. I've been stung by bees, all kinds of things. Even though you're so far out at sea, it's quite strange. But really just an amazing place to visit. If you ever get the opportunity, I mean, I go out on a boat and take people. We don't board the towers anymore because they're not quite safe at the moment. But we do have the opportunity to go out there. And if you do ever fancy doing it, I would thoroughly recommend it because it's just amazing to see them up close. And you can see that there's very similar this to that rusting cable car, isn't it? It's the same textures, the same rivets, and just a little bit frightening, I think, to look at it as well. It looks like two eyes, doesn't it? But inside, there's still some relics from the war, this old bathtub. They used to fill the bath with salt water, and it would freeze up in winter. I mean, it can be bitter cold out there. Those steel walls, I've been out there in January when it's been so cold that if you touch the walls, you would almost freeze your fingers onto the sides. And conversely, in summer when it's so hot, you burn your hands if you touch the steel. It's het up so much. Horrible place to be at any time of year. But it's really, the textures, you could just imagine that flick, the switch being flicked up and down 80 odd years ago. And that door opening and shutting, goodness knows how many times over the years. And I just love the way the paint has crackled all around it. A real otherworldly place to visit. It truly is. And I used to spend hours just sitting there again, the tranquility of being there and just seeing the odd passing container ship, because it's relatively close to the shipping lane. And the forts sway, um, because the legs are sitting on the seabed, they will sort of flex. They needed to flex during the war because the guns on the roof, if they were going off, it needed to withstand the shock of the force of the gun going off. So they're designed to move. But it's a very weird feeling if you're sort of, it's a bit like being on a boat, we get that sort of gentle rocking feeling. That's what you get up there as well. And that's very disconcerting. But Guy Maunsell, who designed them, apparently was so clever. He over-engineered them to the point that they could stand on three legs if needed. Such was the way he designed them to be really robust. And that's what I used to look across at, the control tower, and just imagine what it would have been like in its day when you had all those servicemen running back and forward and the noise of the guns going off. Must have been amazing. But at night is when it really comes into its own, and you've got no light pollution at all out there. And occasionally you've got the sound of the old tanker going by, chugging along. That's the only sound you really get. And on a really calm night, you haven't even got the noise of the buoy for the bell. It's just so quiet. And lying on the roof, again, it's swaying and you've got the shooting stars above your head. If you look across, you can just about see the coast of Southend-on-Sea with a firework display going off. Just gorgeous, just absolutely beautiful. And the sunrises as well were quite something. This was, I think, about 4 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't sleep particularly well, as you can imagine. It was very hot. It was a real heat wave that weekend. And so I just lay on the flat roof without going inside because it was too hot to be inside anyway. But you sort of open your eyes and you can just see the light starting to rise and the pinkness, and it's so flat calm as well, and this gentle mist. I'll never forget it. It was a very special moment, as I'll explain in a moment anyway. Very special morning. But again, very, very misty, but so calm, so beautifully calm. And again, you can see the reflection. But what was special for me, and I keep memories in jam jars. I think we all have those special memories that we keep going back to and we'll never forget. And one of my memories that I keep in my sort of metaphorical jam jar, was it was about 6 in the morning. So I decided to get my breakfast and go back onto the roof, and sit and eat. So I had my blueberry muffin. So I was sitting up on the flat roof, and I just happened to look across at the gun tower opposite, and I was going to sense this beady eyes looking across at me. And there he was, this peregrine falcon, just sitting, staring back at me, eyeing up my muffin. And I will never forget that moment. It was so special, so magical that this beautiful bird had just decided to just sit there quietly, and share the moment with me. I'm just cross that he's got a ruffled feather. I wish he'd smoothed himself down for the photo. But I had my blueberry muffin, and this was his breakfast. He eats the seagull chicks, which is not really nice, but hey ho. But yeah, the towers are just amazing. They have look at them. This is a drone I took out there again. Such an interesting. There's nothing else on the planet to compare with this. They haven't made these anywhere else in the world. And so this is the only place you'll ever see them on the planet. And I think for that reason alone, they're just so special. And as I said, I take a boat out there. Ex-Pilot is the boat that I tour guide from, and we go out from the Isle of Sheppey. And we do day trips out there, but I particularly love doing the sunset trips because they are gorgeous when the sun is starting to set. Again, if you get a lovely, flat, calm evening, it's just beautiful. Um, the light is different every single time you go there, and you get the tide will be up or down, so you'll get more legs on show, and you can sometimes almost see the bottom of the seabed. It can be that flat because there's only a 20-foot tidal range here as well. It's incredibly shallow. And this is one of the trips we did out there. The cormorants were out, and as we approached the towers, it was almost like the fort was hairy. There was just a massive, like these little birds on the top. I thought, what is that? It's all hairy. But as we got close, we could see they were actually birds. Beautiful. And they did an amazing flight when we got really close to them. They all took off in this kind of almost on a murmuration. It was gorgeous. So again, thoroughly recommended. A really nice trip to do. If you want to do something different, try some different camera scenes, something a bit unusual. This is the boat we get on, and you can see we get up very, very close to it. In fact, we can touch the side of the towers when we go out. This particular boat is great for photography. It's got lots of flat space. So if you wanted to put a tripod up, you could. And it's very civilized. There's a kitchen on board, toilets, so it's all very, very pleasant as well. Not like bobbing around on a little fishing boat. And this is a group that I've set up. If you want to see some more photography or learn about the trips when they're happening. I set it up a few years ago just because I felt I wanted to make sure that people knew about these amazing gun towers. And there was about 5 or 6 people joined the group. And over the years, look, we're up at, oh God, almost tickling 15,000 global members now. And it's great. I've got people will join me from the likes of Japan or North America. They'll come over and go out, to photograph the towers and to see them for themselves. So I'm super proud that we've been able to do that. We raise money for charity, and we just celebrate them, because they won't be there forever. The chances are they've probably got about another 5 years, perhaps. The big fear, you can see on that photo there, there's a big piece of rod of steel just dangling off the side. I mean, you can imagine what it's like in a storm out here. And, all of this stuff is being dislodged all the time. So my worst nightmare would be some kind of vessel below and a piece of fort landing on the boat. I think that would draw the attention to the authorities. And at that point, they may consider taking them down if they thought they were going to be a risk to life. But until then, we will celebrate them and love them for what they are. This is the Army Tower, sorry, the Naval Tower, the Army Towers we were just looking at. And again, this is fantastic. It's a little bit further out, 110 foot high, hollow legs. This is Knock John. And I just put this on to show the cross section because the legs are hollow, and this is where the servicemen lived inside here. And the tower legs go right down underwater, as I'll show you in a moment. And this has been abandoned again for 80 odd years, but it's used occasionally by Greenpeace, and they go out there to practice their rope access skills. So they'll abseil up and down the 110-foot high towers to keep their skills up. And if you do manage to get inside, which I'm hoping to get inside this year, it's on my list of things to do, you'll see that it's almost like a time capsule where the original 1940s pin-ups are still in the walls, where it's to this day, which I think is fantastic. I love that. And this picture here shows the tower being taken out, towed out by these steam tugs and positioned onto the seabed. And I mean, there's a whole story I could talk for hours, I won't tonight, but about how they got these vessels and how they navigated that journey from Gravesend right out into the estuary, knocking down boats and knocking over stuff on the way and nearly collapsing and all the rest of it. It's quite an adventure. But it led me to start thinking about the boats themselves. And this boat that you can see in the foreground is called Challenge. And I started to research her to see, because a lot of these vessels have been just abandoned now and don't exist anymore. And I was absolutely thrilled to discover that Challenge is still alive and kicking to this day. And I tracked her down, and at this point in time, she was in dry dock down in Southampton. And so I went to visit her, and she was undergoing restoration with her new owner. And we made a pact. I showed him the photo, and he says, "Yeah, I know about this. I'm really passionate about history." And it was just approaching the 80th anniversary of that photograph being taken. And so we shook hands and agreed that we would come up with a plan, a project to reenact this moment in time where this amazing steam tug took this fantastic 4,500 ton lump of concrete out to sea. And the plan was to do it again. And we achieved it. We actually pulled it off. It was a hell of a project to do, but there we are, 80 years, not only to the day, but to the hour that that initial photograph was taken. We were able to get that boat back out to where it had been all those years before. And it was really emotional. We had Old Lang Syne playing. I had a whole flotilla of vessels out there to capture the moment. And I was a little bit excited and happy about the whole thing, but it was just brilliant. And the steam was going off and horns were tooting. It was a really special day. Super, super proud. And now I'm a trustee for this vessel now. We have the Steamboat Trust, so we raise funds to take her out. She's just been to Dunkirk. She's going over to the Netherlands in May for a big steam parade out there as well. So it's great to see these amazing old pieces of our history are being kept alive. I think it's so important because once they're gone, they're gone. And the other naval tower, then to this day, this one has got a great story. So this is off the coast of Felixstowe, and this was Ruff's Towers. But after the war, we talked about the pirate radio days, and we talked about how they were being used, the towers were being used for broadcasting. And a particular pirate radio guy saw this tower and earmarked it for himself for a radio station. But then he started getting a bit more interested because he realized that the fort was actually positioned outside of UK territorial waters. And so he decided that rather than set it up as a radio station, he would claim it as an independent principality and set it up as his own place. And that's exactly what he did. So he created his own national anthem, his own currency, his own passports, and became the Prince of Sealand. And this was created in 1967, and the fort has been inhabited permanently since that day. and the family continue. You can buy royal titles, which helps to fund the ongoing care and maintenance of the tower. And it's just amazing. It's such an interesting place, and it's always inhabited. This is one of the caretaker security guards who lives on there. And I suppose it's a bit like being a lighthouse keeper, isn't it? It's something very, very different. You need to be a certain type of person, I think, to have that level of solitary confinement. But it suits him fine. He interestingly, he can talk for England, and yet he's out there on his own for weeks on end and doesn't see another soul. But getting on board is really interesting. So again, we're up close now. We are 110 foot up. And you can see this little swing, a little bosun's chair on the left, and the little bag below it. Well, the little bag would lower down onto the boat, and all the supplies would go there. You can see here, you've got to have a real skill. This boat captain has got to make sure he lines up perfectly so that the bosun's chair and the bag drop right in the right place on the boat. All the supplies, everything that goes on the tower goes on here and is winched up, and that includes the people as well. And because I've been so involved in the forts and promoting them, Prince Michael of Sealand reached out to me and invited me to become the Duchess of Sealand for my sort of services to military history, if you like. So I was such a proud moment to be given such a quirky title. It was just brilliant. And then they invited me out there. And I thought, yeah, this is just brilliant. Until I realized it wasn't going to be just like pop out and go on board. It was going to be a bit of a challenge to get on board. And I don't swim, and I'm scared of heights, and I don't like water, and I don't like structures in water. So everything was against me. But I thought, no, I'm going to do it. This is going to be interesting. So off I went on my birthday, and there I am. The boats winched me, got me onto the swing. The swing lowers down. You literally throw yourself at the swing. I said, "Are you going to clamp me on with some kind of seat belt?" And they said, "No, because you need to be able to drop into the sea if something goes horribly wrong. We need you to be able to release yourself from the bosun's chair." Oh, great! This is just my worst nightmare. I was so worried sick about this thing, but it was interesting once I got on there and started that. I think it's about 95 seconds that it takes for the winch to raise you up onto the platform. It was really calm. It was like all the nerves and everything dissipated, and the buggers left me hanging for a little while, but I actually quite enjoyed it despite the terror that I was feeling at the same time. Just amazing. I was wearing a tiara that day as well because I thought, well, I am the Duchess of Sealand, so I might as well dress up for the occasion. And on board, you take your passport, and it is stamped with the Sealand stamp. You can see the Sealand flag in the background there as well. This is on a list. It came out a few years ago, one of the rarest passport stamps that you can get. So I'm quite proud. I've got a whole page of different stamps from the various times that I've been there. But really interesting. So this is all going down into those hollow legs, and 7 stories down, you'll go down these ladders to take you right down, literally down to the seabed. And you can see here where it says the spring low water. So beyond there down, you're underwater. And it is a very, very strange sensation because you've got this sound of the waves hitting against the tower concrete. And it's this horrible sort of unearthly gurgling sound that it makes. It's not a nice sound at all. It's quite eerie, but really interesting. And this is down, so again, this is all like the original wartime structure and the rivets and how it would have been for the servicemen there. And interestingly, the ladder is the original ladder with the original wooden steps. And you can see up close where the servicemen have worn away the wood because they've been going up and down all these years. But right down at the very bottom, this is as far down as you can get down to the seabed. And it feels very, very weird down there. And I was gasping for breath. I mean, I'm relatively fit, and I was standing down here, I could barely breathe. And I said, this is a strange feeling. And Michael said to me, he says, well, it's because there's no oxygen down here. And that ducting that you can see is trying to feed some air down into the lower levels of the tower. And you wouldn't want to spend much time down there. You'd struggle to breathe in the end, as I did. So you would only go down there for a very short amount of time. I mean, obviously during the war they would have had better ways of feeding the air down for the servicemen who were working and living down here. But yeah, I'm one of the very few people that can say that I've been down on the seabed in a Second World War gun tower, which is now a principality. Very, very strange place. But again, I talked about Michael being like a lighthouse keeper, and he will go out there for very much like the servicemen who were in the war. They'd do like 4 to 6 weeks probably would be the average stint, and then they'd come back to land and have some time off and then go back out again. The guys that are security on Sealand do a similar stint. They'll go out there for a few weeks and plan to come home. And whether they do get home as scheduled will very much depend on the weather, as you can imagine, because dangling on that gun tower on the winch is not something you want to do once the wind gets up. I got some amazing video footage of Storm Eunice a couple of years ago, of the waves literally coming over the top of the 110-foot high gun tower, and not a good place to be at all. So they would anticipate being on there for about a month to 6 weeks, but it could be delayed if the weather isn't in your favour. And that mentally for the servicemen must have been absolutely horrendous, because it's a crappy place for them to be anyway. And to have an extended time out there waiting for the weather to improve would have been quite miserable. This is the store cupboard. Obviously, again, you need to take your supplies out and keep enough food in case you are delayed, in case you can't get back onto dry land. And it was really interesting as COVID was breaking back at the end of 2019, wasn't it, into 2020. In my day job is crisis management for a tour operator, one of the things I do. And we actually had an outbreak of COVID. We were one of the first groups of people to get COVID out in Italy. And at that point in time, COVID was real front page news. You might remember is it the Diamond Princess cruise ship where they had infected people and they were bringing them off and putting them in quarantine, and it was all very scary, quite honestly, at that time. And places were starting to close down and go into lockdown. We'd never even heard of that terminology, had we? Lockdown. And I was involved in the evacuation of our tourists and navigating a crisis that like nobody had ever seen before. It was quite weird to have this incredible experience playing out. But my thoughts turned to Sealand, and I could see that all the resorts in Italy were closing their doors, and that was it. Nobody was traveling. And I got to thinking, well, this is going to hit the UK shores before too long. It's not going to be another week or two before we find ourselves in a similar position, which we did. And so I actually contacted the guys at Sealand and I said, don't ask me why, but just go out, go to cash and carry and fill a van with as much food and supplies and stuff that you can get your hands on and take it out to the tower. And they were like, why? I said, just do it. Just do it. Because remember, at this point, it was still quite unknown in the UK. It was just breaking. And so they did. So they went out and they literally filled the shelves on the tower with supplies. And Michael, he's got a television out there and he could see on the news this absolute chaos that was hitting our shores, and the madness of people and how we were in our masks, and it was just a horrendous time. And he said, I'm staying here. He says, I feel happier out here. I don't want to be involved in this madness of us all queuing around the block to get into the toilet roll section of Tesco's or wherever. And so he stayed out there and he was on the tower for 9.5 months. And he never came back. He was like, just leave me here. So he had his supplies, so he was absolutely fine. So I apologise on behalf of the Principality of Sealand for the fact you couldn't get any toilet roll in 2020 because it was all out there. They had everything. So yeah, fascinating to see how something like that can affect a very different way of living. And there we have, there's their Principality of Sealand passports, which they don't issue those at the moment for security reasons. There's so much terrorism going on in the world. It's just, and I think, was it Versace that was when he was murdered? They found a Sealand passport in the flat of the guy who's said to have killed him. So there's all kinds of stuff going on in the background that so they don't issue the Sealand passports anymore, but they do have the stamps, which if you do visit, which is a very, very rare thing to be given the opportunity to go onto Sealand itself. I think they probably take maybe 10 people a year. So very, very rare indeed. Then you would take your normal passport and it would be stamped as you board the tower. So there we have it. There was my mournful thoughts, and as I said, I was extremely proud of this amazing engineer who had designed this incredible thing. It'd never been done before. And, you know, the Ministry of Defence was skeptical that these towers would actually do their job. But he proved them wrong and they did the job. As I said, they shot down 22 enemy aircraft, 30 doodlebugs. So there's families alive today in London that would not have been alive were it not for the fact that he had come up with this incredible engineering idea. He also was involved in designing the Mulberry Harbours. And if you drive over Hammersmith flyover, that's his work as well. So an amazing guy. But then I thought, with my love of graveyards, I thought, well, I wonder where he's buried. And so I tracked his grave down. As you can see on the left, his grave's in Southborough Cemetery near Tunbridge Wells in Kent. And it was a sorry looking little grave, very, very neglected, dirty, overgrown. It was just, I thought, for a man so important who's done so much in our military history, it just, I thought it was really sad that his grave had just been left. I've never managed to track down a living member of his family. I've traced his family tree. It all goes very empty in terms of knowledge as to where anybody is. I've had people who have claimed to be a relative of him, but I've traced their family tree as well to verify it and can't find a connection. So I basically adopted his grave. So I've cleaned it. It's all been tidied up, as you can see on the right-hand side there. And every year I celebrate. I go all year round. I've planted so many spring bulbs. There's thousands of them there now. So there's always colour all year round. And on the anniversary of his passing, I go down and pay my respects. And it was due to it was the 60th anniversary of his passing a few years ago. And I had a message out of the blue from this gentleman who said, I'm, really proud of what you do, and it's really good of you to do this. And I'm involved with Biggin Hill, and I happen to have a fleet of Spitfires. And I said to him about it was the anniversary, and he says, "Well, how about I get one of the Spitfires out and come over the cemetery and do a few victory rolls as you're laying." I was doing a wreath that year. As you're laying the wreath on his grave, I'll just be above doing a little bit of aerobatics for you. And I thought, oh my God, that's just amazing. And he did. And so this is the company, flyspitfire.com. They're based at Biggin Hill. It's the biggest concentration of Spitfires in the world today. So he's got three two-seaters and about 14 other Spitfires in various, some of them are airworthy, some of them are in the stages of restoration. And it's a fantastic place to visit if you ever want to go there. You can get guided tours of there as well. And it was just so, I thought, after all these years, and I thought it'd be very interesting because Guy Maunsell, I get the impression, was a very understated, quiet man. And I'm not even sure he would have been impressed by this blonde putting this wreath on his grave with all this Spitfire going on over his head. He would have probably been like, shut up, and I don't want any fuss. But proud moment to do it. And then the following year, so I became very good friends with Peter, the owner of flyspitfire.com. And he says, well, I suppose you want to do it this year, do you? And so I was exceptionally privileged to be sitting in the back of the two-seater Spitfire. And we flew over his grave. I flew with the chief pilot was a gentleman called Dan Griffiths, who was a test pilot. So he's supremely brilliant aviator. And it was just an amazing experience. We flew right over the cemetery so low, and we tipped on our side. And we were so low you could actually see the flowers on the grave. It was something else, just an amazing experience. Very, very emotional as well, to be in an aircraft that old that's been restored. This was the first Spitfire that I flew. And this is the view from inside. Incredibly noisy. The noise of the Merlin engine is something that people talk about, and the emotions and the evocative sound, and it's wonderful. But when you're actually inside the Spitfire, you don't get that sound. It sounds like you're in a washing machine full of spanners. It's a very different noise altogether. So it's actually one of those things where it's better to hear it from the outside than from the inside. But the victory rolls are wonderful, and they really are an incredible feeling of pressure on you as you go over. And as you can see, I rather quite enjoyed it. And I've been really privileged. I've now done 5 Spitfire flights, 2 Mustang flights. This was the latest Mustang flight that I did in Moonbeam McSwine, which was a really special day. This was last summer. And we took the Mustang down to, obviously via Guy Monsel's grave, but we then took it down to Beachy Head. And it was a day of celebration because there was the big Battle of Britain celebration going on. And as we flew down, I looked down, and underneath, flying below our aircraft, was a fleet of Spitfires, 3 Spitfires, a Hurricane, and a two-seater Spitfire. This was the Battle of Britain Ministry of Defence memorial flight underneath us. And in the two-seat Spitfire, looking up at me, was the astronaut Tim Peake. And I'll never, it's another one of my memories in a metaphorical jam jar. I shall never forget it. Absolutely brilliant. And this is some of the aircraft that I've been absolutely privileged to fly in. Just brilliant. But I love as well, I love detail. And if you go to Biggin Hill, you can do one of their technical tours, which are really, really great for photography because you get a chance, if you're interested in aviation and wartime history, you get to meet the pilots as well and the engineers, and they'll talk to you about the renovation, the restoration of the Spitfires. But to be able to get up close and take some interesting photos of, you wouldn't know it was a Spitfire from looking at the wing spar there, but I loved all of that. And then what they'll do as well is they'll fire up, they'll wait for nightfalls, you'll get the sunset pictures, and then they'll fire up a Spitfire in the dark, and you'll get the flames coming out of the exhaust. So for photography, it's brilliant. It's absolutely lovely. And again, just that feeling of history and of those aviators, those amazing men going out in the Battle of Britain, pressing that gun, dagger, 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 setting off the guns. And this is the frame where they put the fuselage when they're creating the restorations as well. Just interesting, isn't it? I like the colours on it. And again, this was at nightfall. It's always lovely when you get a really nice sunset. I love sunsets and sunrises, my favourite times of day. And I just think this is, it's a weapon of war, but it's such a beautiful thing to look at as well. And again, just having that light, the golden light flooding down, especially when it's been raining as well. I've got some really nice pictures of Spitfire puddles over the years too. And if you're lucky, then you'll get that hot start. And that comes when they over prime the engine too much and the mix is wrong, and you get the flames where you shouldn't. Um, it should burn out. There is an overburn, I think they call it, where you could actually have a proper engine fire. So there's a fine line between it looking fabulous and dramatic, and running for the fire brigade at the same time. But I just think it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? Spitfire. So air-to-air photography, then you saw some photographs of my flights. They were taken in what we call air vans, air-to-air photography, sh camera ships, another way that we describe them. It's little light aircraft that fly alongside the Spitfires. They're really great fun if you ever get the chance, or maybe you've done it before yourself, but if you ever want to do it or get the chance, I would thoroughly recommend it, because it's really interesting to do. It's really hard work as well, to capture the imagery, to get the prop blur, to get a moving aircraft as well. Bearing in mind that Spitfires are flying at like 200 miles an hour as well. This particular aircraft is the G8 Airvan, and it's brilliant because of the position of the wing. Gives you a good visual out of your window. And what I tend to do, break a few rules, is when we're out flying, is take the seatbelt off and I'm on the floor of the aircraft with the window open, shooting out, and moving around the aircraft a lot as the Spitfire flies from side to side. But you need to be very prepared for this kind of photography because it is a real challenge. You've got the pilots very, very close to each other and they are locking eyes, they're locking visuals, and they're in formation, almost like a ballet moving together. And they are incredibly close, as you'll see in some of the photos in a moment. But it's all about the weather with things like this, as you can imagine, especially in Britain. A lot of waiting around for the right conditions, to be in the air, because obviously you want it to be optimum conditions as well. Risk of being airsick. It can be a bit of a challenge because, as I said, you're moving around a lot. You're not focusing on the horizon. You're looking through your lens a lot as well. So you need to have that in mind. Maybe take some travel sickness pills before you go. And some practical thoughts as well. The windows of the planes can steam up, which is a disaster. So I always carry a cloth with me, so I'm ready to wipe them inside and out before we take off as well. Slight scratch or a little blemish on the glass will trash your images. So it's really important to do the legwork, do the preparation, make sure that the aircraft is in perfect condition for your flight. And choosing your seat carefully on board as well to make sure you start in the right position, because some seats are going to give you a better visual than others. It's so okay if you're on your own. If you're the only one in the aircraft, you can, dash around between the seats. But if there's more of you on board, which if you are doing it as a shoot with other photographers, then you're not going to be able to do that. So you want to make sure you bag the best seat in the first instance as well. And you will be having headphones on as well, because you'll be listening to the pilots and they're talking to each other as well. They're giving commands, and I'll talk about a shoot I did later on, but you may find yourself directing the aircraft as well. A shoot that I did recently, I had to tell the pilot where I wanted him so I could get the image that I needed for a particular thing. So you've got to be listening to them, they've got to be listening to you. And this plane's quite good because, as you can see, it's got dark seats, but we've also got another light aircraft we use, which has got very light cream seats, and they reflect really badly. So you could get the reflection in your images. So if you are ever going to do that kind of thing, think about the detail. Wear black yourself so you're not reflecting. And, what I would do now, if I knew I was going in the aircraft with white seats, is I would take some black covers and actually cover the seats so that it we don't get that reflection, because it's really important. You've got to bear in mind as well, you don't get an awful lot of time. If it's an air-to-air with a Spitfire, you would probably have 10 minutes in formation, which is not long at all. So you really need to make sure that you've got everything absolutely optimum. And take loads and loads of photos. Memory's cheap. Keep shooting. Just max out that short window that you've got up in the air with the Spitfire next to you. And you won't need much of a zoom because you are incredibly close. This is the other plane, the Piper Saratoga. This is more of a challenge because it's a low wing. You can see the wings in a very different position now. And that does mean that your images will potentially have a bit of wing on them. So you might need to do a bit more cropping. It's quite a slow plane as well in comparison to a Spitfire. As I said, Spitfires are doing well, they don't like going less than 200 miles an hour. So this plane would take off and go and position itself wherever you are going to do the shoot. So it's in situ. And then the Spitfire would take off and zoom across and join you. And then we'd fly in formation, as I said, for normally about 10 minutes or so. And then it would shoot off because and Mustangs as well are even worse. They really hate going slow. So they will start to sort of judder. So the pilot might actually have to break off and do something just to kind of regain the control and make the aircraft happy again. This is Brands Hatch. This is one of the routes that we take down to the south coast. But yeah, you've got to be so ready for this kind of thing, and it's absolutely exhausting as well. I mean, you're, as I said, physically and mentally, you're really focused on what you're doing, and you're crouching on the aircraft floor. You might be hanging out the window. There's different levels of risk you can take. There's some aircraft you would actually have a sliding open door and you would be harnessed to stop you actually falling out of the aircraft. That would be a better way because you've got a much clearer vision, but that is really hard work, and you ache all over afterwards. You really do. You feel it, I'll tell you. But you can see how close we are. It's very, very close indeed. And those pilots are really looking at each other. They are absolutely locked on each other because being so close, they can't afford for something to go wrong. You can see a bit of reflection there. That's what you've got to be mindful of as well. Nice clouds there. That was a really nice day over the Cotswolds. And if you are directing, as I said, you've got your headphones on so you can talk to the pilots. There'll be phrases that they will use. If you hear knock it off, that means the Spitfire is going to break, so he'll peel off. And obviously that's one of the money shots. So you want to be on the right seat, in the right position, waiting to hear that. Because once he's gone, he's gone. So you've got to be absolutely sharp as a pin for that. If you are directing, which is what I've done on occasion, then you are more in control of that, and you can tell him when you want him to knock it off. The other thing you might do as well is wear white gloves. So he's looking in at your aircraft, and it means if it's all dark in the aircraft, but you're wearing gloves, you can use hand signals to him as well. Particularly where the radio transmissions aren't very clear or very crackly or faint, you might not have that verbal communication as good as you would like. So by agreeing hand signals in advance, you can get him to go up, get him to go down, point him in different directions and whatever. So the white gloves are obviously a visual way of doing that. And this is a view from inside then. Again, that is how close you are. When you're in a normal commercial aircraft and you're flying to Bahrain or wherever you're going, if there's another aircraft in the vicinity, it's going to be so far away. It's either very high above you, below you, or in front of you, a speck on the distance. It's quite something to be in a light aircraft like this and to suddenly turn and see this monster appear in the window next to you. It's breathtaking. And that's again, you've got to think about you're looking at this and you want to look at it and enjoy it, but you've also got to capture those images as well. And sometimes you just get overexcited because it is just the most incredible thing. It's expensive. If you're talking about cost to do something like this, you're going to be paying about £100 a minute. And as I said, you are going to be throwing yourself around the aircraft as well. So I think you've got to really put your homework in and prepare for it well and think about all of the challenges that you might face and find a solution in advance and clean the windows. That's the best advice I can give you. Make sure the windows are as clear as they can be. And then you can start getting some really close-up shots. You can count the rivets there. Just amazing to think that that aircraft is almost within touching distance. And this is just such a weird one, this. It almost looks like a model aircraft that's been put on a piece of fields, doesn't it? It's really, really strange. And then this is the knock it off, knock it off. Off he peels right over the White Cliffs down at Beachy Head along the Seven Sisters. And again, so close. You'll see the pilot in the front cockpit is really focused on the pilot in the chase plane. He's not going to let go of his visuals on him. It's beautiful. You just about get the sound of the Merlin engine from inside, but remember you've got headphones on as well. With the Mustang, you're more likely to hear it as it zooms across you. You'll get the sort of whistle of that incredibly fast engine. Gorgeous planes. And this one's it's got its invasion stripes, which were obviously painted on so that it could be recognized with the um, against the enemy aircraft. It wouldn't be shot down by mistake. And the key thing as well is to make sure that you think about, with everything else I've just talked about, being in the right seat, wearing the right clothes, doing the right hand signals, listening, cleaning the windows, watching for reflections. You've also got to think about what are you looking at? How are you going to frame that picture? And think about the route. Where is that aircraft going to be in formation with you? And what is there to make this a beautiful image? Are you going to rely on beautiful cotton wool clouds for the effect? Or is there a site or something that is there that you need to capture or we want to capture? And in this instance, it's the Beachy Head Lighthouse. So this was me in the back of the Spitfire, and this is a brilliant photographer, Richard Paver, does a lot of aviation photography. I put him in the chase plane because I knew he'd do a good job of it. And I said, I want a picture. The money shot is me with the lighthouse and the Spitfire. And I timed my flight because I wanted to be down there when the tide was out as well. So all of these things had to come together. And I think he did a jolly good job of that. He got the lighthouse just in the right position. And it looks lovely with the yellow nose of the Spitfire as well, the nose cone and the red and white of the lighthouse, I think. He's done a great job. And again, sometimes it's not necessarily a particular landmark. It could just be something interesting below that just makes it look a little bit more curious, perhaps. What is that? And this is what we fly from Blackbush Airport, and this is going down towards Highclere Castle. And I was very proud of myself to get the prop blur on the propeller, which will be to do with shutter speed. But as I said, I'm not technical, so I wouldn't be able to explain that to you, but I was very happy to achieve it nevertheless. And again, just beautiful aircraft, it takes you back to the war, that evocative smell of all the aviation fuel and the lubricants, beautiful things, weapons of war, but beautiful with it. And again, as I said, this is about finding a really good composition and a really nice scene. I think those Seven Sisters cliffs down towards the Beachy Head Lighthouse is probably the most beautiful place in the UK. Is just gorgeous, I think, and that's my favorite route. If I'm privileged enough to fly, I always want to go down there just because it's lovely. I mean, we talk about the White Cliffs of Dover, and that obviously is very iconic for the Spitfire, but the reality is the cliffs there aren't very good because they are a bit darker and because of their positioning. But the time you would get down there, the light is the sun's changed position and it's not really brilliant light. Whereas here, the light is hitting perfectly to pop the cliffs. You've got the lovely white of the cliffs, but you wouldn't really get that kind of effect so much down at Dover. So although it's an iconic place, I think if you want white cliffs and Spitfires, then it's actually the Beachy Head area that's going to give you the money shot. And so, having flown a lot as a customer, I was really, there's only one more place for me to go, and that was to actually join the business as ground crew, which is what I do in my spare time. And that's amazing fun. I'm now part of the organization. I'm enjoying the whole part of bringing people who have maybe saved for a lifetime for this incredible bucket list experience. And it's so rewarding to see people. I mean, this lovely lady, gosh, she was approaching, I think she's in her 80s. And she'd always loved warbirds all her life. And there she was she'd just come off her Spitfire flight and she was so emotional about it. And that's the thing, you get grown men who are all normally very blasé and they turn up where I give them their briefings and get them kitted up in their fireproof flying suits and get them prepared for their flight. And they are so nervous and so worried about it. It's so interesting how people feel about it. It's quite a moment, quite an emotional thing for people to fly in a Spitfire. And then they land, and it's not unusual for them to be in tears. I've been in tears myself because it just feels so special to do it. And it's just such a privilege to be part of that kind of thing. It's such a lovely thing to do. And sometimes people are at the end of their lives, maybe they have a terminal illness, and this is kind of it. There's the last hurrah, if you like. So you get all sorts. Aged 18, a young girl was 18. Then there was an amazing lady who I'll talk about in a minute who had a Spitfire flight for her 90th birthday, which was just brilliant. And here I am in the chase plane. Her family, as I said, the son, who you can just see in the front there, had booked the flight for her 90th birthday. And they turned up at the airport and they said, oh, would I do some photos for them? I said, no problem, be delighted to. And I looked at him and I thought, he looks a bit familiar. And you know how you look at someone, but you can't quite place who he is. And it turned out that it was Benedict Cumberbatch. And the lady in the Spitfire, his mum is Wanda Veltham, who's a very famous actress from the 1960s. She was in a lot of things like The Persuaders and UFO and all of these cult television programs. And she's Rodney's mother-in-law in Only Fools and Horses as well. And so there she was on her 80th, sorry, 90th birthday, having a Spitfire flight. And she was so full of life. It's absolutely brilliant. She had an amazing time. And he was really chilled about it because we quite often have a lot of photographers at the airport, plane spotters. And he was a bit worried when they turned up that he saw these cameras and thought that this was people there to take his picture and his mum's, and he wanted it to be quite a private event for her. And I said, don't worry, they're not here for you. They're here for the plane. Bless him. So, but it was a lovely day. And I actually took I think, a really nice set of photos for her. And I had them printed out recently and took them up to give them to her a couple of weeks ago. And she was absolutely over the moon. So really proud of that. Such a lovely day. And this was my most recent escapade. This is a very special Spitfire. It's a Mark One Spitfire, and it is owned by a multi-billionaire supermarket owner called Fritz van Willer, something or other, in Holland. it's multi-million pound restoration, very, very special, very, very unique. I've followed this restoration in the hangar for about 3 or 4 years now. Every time I go to the hangar, you can see it starting to come together. And everybody that works there or anybody that goes there always has a soft touch for this particular plane. And everyone's always said, "Oh, I'd love to be there the day they start it up for the first time. That would be a real moment to be able to experience that, having watched it being rebuilt." And I felt the same. I felt really, it was a lovely, lovely looking plane. So I happened to be at Biggin Hill one day, and the owner and the owner of Biggin Hill was talking to one of the engineers, and they said, "Peter, my friend, wants it flown today, and they need to get the photos done today, and they need video footage, and it's got to be done today." And they said, "Well, we've got no one to do it." And they turned to me and said, "Well, you can do it, Flo." And I was like, not only am I going to see this plane start up, I'm actually going to be the only person to see it doing its maiden flight down to the coast. I thought, oh my goodness. And then they said, "Oh, we need video footage as well, because there's a documentary that's been made about this specific aircraft and its restoration. And so we need to get some air-to-air footage as well. So you have to do that too." And I'm like, oh my God, I have never done video photography before. What do I do? And I sat there, and imposter syndrome came bubbling right up to the surface. I was shaking and I was thinking to myself, I can't do this. I'm going to bottle it. And I will never forget that feeling of just awfulness of thinking, I can't do this. I don't feel I'm good enough to do this. And I was really kicking myself and beating myself up to the point where I was nearly sick. And then I thought, you know what? What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is you take some rubbish photographs and they have to do it again with a better photographer. And so I pushed myself into the aircraft and down we went. The plan was to fly her down to Dover and then fly along the coast, right past Dover, Dover Castle, the port, all the iconic sites along the coast to the Battle of Britain Memorial at Cape Holofernes, where they wanted this shot. And we talked about getting the shot, the money shot, which has got the right landmark and everything in. And I'm like, well, how am I going to even do this? Thinking of all the things I needed to think about, the reflections. The radio in the Mark 1 Spitfire wasn't very good, so we had very limited communications with the pilot. So that didn't help because we could just about hear him muffling, telling us something, and we didn't quite know what. So there was a lot of visuals in terms of direction. And off we went. And we shot, and I said about air to air normally being in formation for about 10 minutes. We were up there for an hour and a half, to the point where they nearly shut Biggin Hill Airport and we nearly had to divert to Southend-on-Sea Airport because we were so late coming in that evening. But I got that shot. I got the prop blur. I got some, I think, really nice video footage. There's a chance it will be used on Channel 4, which I find amazing to think that I might have done something of that caliber. But for me, the shot was being able to get the Spitfire with the prop blur over the Cape Holofernes memorial. When I got home that night and I started to download my photos from my SD cards, and my heart was racing, thinking, what if they're crap? What if they're crap? What am I going to do? And as I was going through them, I was thinking, actually, that's all right. That doesn't look bad at all. I was so relieved, and I'm so glad I did it. And I would say to you, if ever you doubt yourself, just do it. Just do it, because the euphoria of succeeding is a feeling I don't think I've ever felt before. I was so, so proud. And then to top it all off, I've got told just after that that Fly Past magazine, which is like the equivalent of Vogue but for aeroplanes, They did a feature on this, and they actually they put my, oh, it's all gone horribly wrong. There we go. They put my photo on a center spread in their magazine. And aviation photographers, this is like the holy grail to get your images into fly past. It's what everybody aspires to do. And I know some technically brilliant photographers, aviation photographers, amazing guys, and they've not got their pictures in. And I have, and I'm just incredibly proud. So it doesn't matter that you've got a bridge camera. It doesn't matter that you don't have the technical skills. It doesn't matter that you don't know an F stop from an F stop. It just doesn't matter. Have faith. Have faith in your ability and be bold and just try it. And there's nothing that can go wrong then. You might not get a brilliant image, but you've tried. And if you can do that, then you will eventually succeed. And I think just to end on that note, like I said, I don't rate myself as a photographer. Everything you've seen tonight has been shot on quite humble equipment in comparison to what you could spend. But if you consider what you're doing and really think about the shots, try to get something different that maybe other people won't have shot before, because that in itself makes a photo interesting, I think. And enjoy it. I don't take photos for anybody but myself. I take it for therapy to give me a calm feeling and in a sense of achievement if you happen to get a shot that you like. That's always a bonus, but it's about just enjoying the moment. So I would just say thank you for having me this evening. It's been, I hope you're all still there. I can't see you because I've only got this on my view. I'm hoping you're all still present and haven't all disappeared off to sleep. But if you do have any questions, you're very welcome to pop up. I'm going to stop sharing now. And you're all still there. That's a
Everybody
relief.
is still here. Yeah.
What a
Well
relief that
done.
is.
Thank you so much, Flo. That was absolutely amazing and inspirational, which was the
Oh,
main thing, isn't it? And like you said, it's not about the equipment, it's about you
mm.
and your feelings towards something, and that's such a lesson for everyone, isn't it? Really,
Never forget that. You
yeah.
know, I know people that have got such incredible kit, and I look at their images and they leave me cold. That
Mm.
I'm not feeling anything. And I think an image you need to have a reaction, whether it's revulsion or delight or amazement. But if an image doesn't give you a feeling, I don't think it's done its job.